rivalry between the two of them.
Is Tom with you also?
Cool.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, he's on a different line, yes.
Great, thanks, Tom.
Good morning.
Once you get it up, it's
Alrighty, are we pretty much ready to go, Michael? Looks like 8 o'clock and you got everything set.
I think we're together.
I can deliver punctuality. I'm not sure what else I can deliver as the pinch hitter on the chair for today, but I can't deliver punctuality. So let me call this meeting to order. This is a regular meeting of the Board of Directors of the Kirkwood Meadows Public Utility District. Today, January 11th, 2014, it's 8 a.m. And welcome various members of the public, including we've got some candidates who are running around buttonholing people for signatures. So got a bunch of nice new faces to see. And let's see, Michael, I believe you are doing the announcements this morning.
Welcome to the Kirkwood Meadows Public Utility District's regular board meeting on January 11, 2014. Today's meeting is being live fed over the internet, so just go to our website, KMPUD.com, and follow the appropriate link. If you are watching remote and have a question or would like to make a comment, just email us at kmpudms@volcano.net. Please note that email address has changed to kmpudms@volcano.net. The board will respond at regular intervals. I would like to welcome Supervisor Terry Woodrow and Supervisor Ron Hames from Alpine County. Thank you for coming. Hames, sorry.
You know how many years?
Yeah, almost 30, I think. Ron Hames from Alpine County. I also like to welcome Peter Forrest, the Executive Officer for Kirkwood Resort Development, KRD. Nicole Waddell is our new AD specialist, so she'll be taking Drew Matier's place. And Tom Chidosi and Dave Rightly are both on the line with Exponential Engineering.
Thank you, sir. Secretary Dornberg, would you do the roll call, please?
Sure. Rickard? Here. O'Grady, absent. Andy?
See you someplace with snow. Yeah, I'm here.
Dornbrook here, and Epstein? Epstein present. Okay.
Thank you, sir. Okay, this brings us to item 4 on the agenda. This is the oral communication and public input point, and if there is anyone in the public who would like to address the board on a non-agenda topic relating to business district, noting that no action will be taken by the board on matters that appear on the agenda. Is there anyone who would want to speak? All right. Hearing none. We'll move to item 5, which is any corrections to the agenda or consent calendar. And this consent calendar is attached. And I assume people have had a chance to look at it. Are there any corrections to the agenda, Michael?
No, sir.
All right. Anyone want to make any corrections or ask any questions about the consent calendar? Very well. Then we will move to item 6, which is the adoption of the consent calendar. And you looking for a motion to adopt?
Yeah, I'd like to
consent calendar.
move that we adopt the consent calendar for January 11th, 2014. I'll second that.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Consent calendar is adopted. In Standish O'Grady's absence, since he's not on the phone, we don't have to do individual voice voting.
That is correct.
Okay. All right. Item 7 is irrelevant since we brought the consent calendar forward and approved it. And we are on to item 8, do an unfinished business. And beginning with item A, this is discussion and possible action regarding the design timeline, bidding process, costs, and construction activities associated with the Out Valley Power Line project. Michael, to you, sir.
5 agenda topics will be related to the Out Valley project today. The update will be covered by Michelle and I, and then we will look at a Q&D change order. Next, the board will consider the owner-furnished material for the control building at the KM Green substation. And then the board will review a change order from Exponential. And finally, Brandy Fitchner and I will discuss the preliminary plans for operation and maintenance of the Out Valley line. As the board is aware, the district is working with Howard Barnes on a supplemental loan through Russ for $8 million. Howard has confirmed that Russ has adequate funding to meet our request. Our loan has passed through the engineering department of RUS and now is with the operations department, which is actually their finance department. Then, after it goes through their finance department, it will be submitted for approval through two committees, a junior and a senior. Howard estimates that our loan could be approved in February with funds available in the summer when it's needed. In the packet on page 9 is the calendar through November 2013 Form 7 report. This report has been given to Russ, and it shows that with the infusion of property tax, the district is at a 1.04 tier ratio for the electric fund. 1.05 is required. Once December numbers are finalized, we will be able to determine if any property tax allocation is needed for December and if any of November's property tax can be reallocated. And with that, unless there's any questions on that issue, I'll turn it over to Michelle for the general update.
All right, good morning. Can everybody hear me okay? Dave, Tom, I know we had problems before.
Yes, I can hear you.
Great, thank you. Since I was here last, it's been pretty quiet. We've completed all of our construction activities for the construction season, so we've been working on getting all of the year-end paperwork wrapped up for the contractors. We have 2 pay requests that we're processing for Wilson Construction. Those were sent to the district earlier this week, and then I'll be processing the final pay request for Q&D for their work next week. Winter activities tend to be a lot less intensive, which is kind of nice. We are working very proactively with the Forest Service. As I discussed in December, we have a meeting we're working on setting up for the end of this month or early February to meet with the Forest Service Biology to discuss the spotted owl LOP and follow up with the letter that we sent them back in December to see if we can move forward with some relief on the LOP for construction in 2014. We're also working very intensively with PG&E. We have submitted to PG&E the clearances that Wilson has requested for outages along the power line, the existing power line for construction activities in 2014. We're coordinating with PG&E to see if we can work with the outages that they need and minimize any outages and days that we'll need and they'll need for next year. We have to get that into PG&E early as we can so that we can make sure that they have our outages on the books, so to speak, and we'll be first in line so that when we do need our outages, there's more of a likelihood that we'll be able to get them when we need them. We began drafting the long-term noxious weed plan that we need as part of the permanent special use permit with the Forest Service. I talked to Joanne yesterday, and she has that in draft form. We've coordinated with the Forest Service biologist. We're coordinating with PG&E. We are tasked with developing the long-term special use permit between the district and the Forest Service, and also drafting the preliminary SUP for PG&E and the Forest Service. That's part of the interconnection agreement requirements. Those SUPs are going to be very similar, so we're drafting essentially one, and we'll have some different names in the second one for PG&E. So we're coordinating with PG&E on their noxious weed and other requirements that PG&E has to put into the SUP. We want to make sure that we have that in front of PG&E as early as we can this spring. It's going to have to be reviewed by their attorneys, and we need to have that document ready to be finalized prior to the start of interconnection operations. So we want to make sure that we have all of those SUPs that can kind of get bogged down in some of the bureaucratic review. We want to make sure that those are done and ready to go by all parties this summer so that when we're ready to commence interconnection operations, it's just a signature that needs to be done. We're going to talk a little bit later about the change order with Q&D, and we have up here a approval of the bid for the control building. We will have 2 remaining owner-furnished material items that are going to go out to bid for approval at the February meeting, and then we are going out to bid in February for the actual construction of the 2 substations, and so that will be before the board at the March meeting, and that will be the last of the items that we need to go out to bid on. I provided an updated schedule. We're coordinating our schedule with PG&E. We still are meeting weekly with PG&E and reviewing the schedule as far as any outstanding items and looking ahead. And then I provided an updated cost estimate. It's pretty similar to what I presented in December with just some minor updates as far as some of the payments that were made. So with that, I'll take any questions.
So Michelle, on the cost estimate, now that we're as far along as we are, I know we have the bids for the construction of the substations, and that could be, the estimate is $3.9 million for the two of them. But I think that includes our owner furnished materials as well, some of which we know about. I'm just wondering, is the biggest opportunity we have to bring our costs down still, I guess, is it the ITCC tax? I mean, do we have any opportunities at all, do you think, to bring this cost down?
They're getting fewer and fewer as we move forward. The ITCC, we still have an opportunity to, if we can realize that tax at 22% as opposed to the 34%, those are the larger dollar numbers. The rest of the project, it's small savings where we can get them, but I don't see any large dollar amounts out there.
And they seem to be offset by change order requests. I mean, they
Correct.
seem to be balancing each other out.
Mhm.
Other board questions? Any questions from the public? All right. Well, that concludes item A, I believe. Is that, all right, you want to move on to 8B, discussion and possible action regarding request for change order for KMPUD construction in relation to the district's Out Valley Power Line projects.
As anticipated, Q&D, who is our underground contractor, has submitted a request for change order for work completed in 2013. Most of this change order is for volcano telephone conflicts, where due to the meandering nature of the telephone lines and the number of lines, up to 4 in some sections, volcano telephone lines had to be rerouted into the district's trench. These fall into 2 categories. One where the district requested the change because it made more operational sense to, rather than try to go around volcano to actually put them in the trench. And secondly, where volcano or the Forest Service requested the change. Forest Service requests would be like around Tragedy Springs, where actually the volcano line went up and above the Tragedy Springs memorial area rather than down in the road where it is located now. District requested changes amount to $154,000. Volcano requested and paid for amounted to $49,000. Other items included are the cost to place the conduit under Highway 88. The board will remember that we placed additional 6-inch conduit over there for future development. Site condition costs, such as unmarked utilities here in Kirkwood, and efforts to protect the rocked culvert at Tragedy Springs that you remember. Of these, it was a total cost of $41,000. Of these, $19,000 was the district's responsibility. And then cost due to damaged cable that was found from the Prismian cable, where Q&D actually had to roll it out and revise their work because there was damaged cable. The total request is for $259,000. Of this, $182,000 is the district's responsibility and was anticipated and is reflected in a $211,000 expense in the cost forecast under Volcano Relocates. The balance has been or will be paid by the responsible party. We have received a check from Volcano already to cover their amount of this. Staff recommends approval and payment of the Q&D change order number 1. I'll open up for questions.
Any questions from the board?
I guess the only question I have is going forward, there's always unforeseen circumstances, I suppose, but are there any mysteries that, we knew the volcano thing was hanging out there. Is there anything else hanging out there for the next construction season that we think could cause any significant change order?
The only thing that I see, based on what we experienced this year during construction, is the potential for some additional paving costs. What we experienced in the Caltrans right-of-way this year was we ended up paving more than we had originally anticipated for that one section by Silver Lake. I've met with Q&D at the end of the construction season. I just met with my inspectors earlier this week, and then prior to start of construction, I'm going to have a meeting with Q&D and my inspectors to look at ways that we can minimize our paving requirements in the field, make some other field adjustments to try and keep more of the conduit out of the pavement, because what Caltrans required us to do was to pave a larger section than we had anticipated paving. So that's the biggest cost that I see potentially down the road, and I believe that we're taking steps to be very aggressive and minimize those costs. The work that we have on the underground project for 14 is mostly in the Caltrans right-of-way. It's in the road along Bear River Road. We have the areas where we have volcano, we've accounted for them in this change order that's before you, looking forward. So based on what I know of the project, I'm not anticipating any significant change orders. Say that at this point.
So are you framing the question just around the underground portion of the project? Or were you
Well, for
thinking-
Q&D, yeah,
Yeah.
for this was Q&D.
It would seem like there's a lot more work yet to be done on the overhead, and that makes the uncertainty broader.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so these costs as they came up, or these problems as they came up and had to be dealt with, we were informed about them at the time that they were identified. We had an opportunity to discuss how to address each one. That's what I think I'm taking out of this. So there was good practice in terms of how the interaction took place between Q&D and other parties in dealing with these difficulties. And it's not like, this is not a surprise, not an ex post facto discussion. It's something that happened a budget months ago. We didn't know anything about it at the time. It's quite different than that in actual fact.
Correct. As you know, as early as when we first started construction on the underground, that's when we became aware of the volcano issue, and we actually allocated those dollars at that point. These other items that came up, we knew as soon as we started construction here in Kirkwood with some of the utility conflicts, and we had those discussions at that point. Really, the other only unknowns were very minor in nature for a project this size, dealing with the rocked culvert that we had to essentially tunnel underneath, and then some culverts that we encountered that we did not know about and had to repair because they were so in such disrepair.
I guess, I mean, if I remember correctly, the structure of the bid was based on unit costs and then some assumptions about how many units of rock versus dirt, et cetera.
Correct.
Has that been trued up? Has that been?
It's been trued up with every pay request.
Okay.
I would be happy to share with you the spreadsheet that we do. These are some of the most complicated pay requests that I've ever done, because we have so many different factors that go into this, and so many district and volcano volcano original and volcano new, and but we look at this on a we actually track this on a daily basis with our inspectors. So from their reports, we pull off the quantities. If the contractor is pouring slurry or bringing in material, we track that daily, and so we true that up with their pay requests.
But the net result is there hasn't been any significant movement one way or another.
No.
Versus the Q&D, the number that we saw, the 12 point whatever it was, $1 million that we saw.
No. We've actually seen some reductions in some of the material because they've been able to use more native material on site, but those are small bid items.
Any questions from the public? All right, there being none, this looks like we're to the point of asking for a recommendation to adopt the change order as it appears on the package on page 10 and beyond. Motion.
I move that we approve change order number 1 for Q&D, the amount of
$259,000.
$259,000.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. All righty. We move now to item 8C, discussion and possible approval of procurement agreement for the KM Green Substation Project Control Building in relation to the district's Out Valley Power Line project.
On December 9th, the district went out for proposals for a control building for the KM Green substation. This is a prefabricated building approximately 27 feet long and 12 feet wide, which will house the weather-sensitive equipment for the KM Green substation. On Monday, January 6th, the district held a bid opening with 6 respondents. Engineer's estimate on this project is $370,000. Before you is a recommendation from Dave and Michelle. And Dave Rightly of Exponential Engineering is here to discuss this proposal and support his recommendation. David?
Thank you, Michael. Good morning, everybody. As Michael said, we had 6 bidders. They actually submitted 7 separate proposals as one. Gave two proposals included with an option. What we discovered in looking at these proposals is we required numerous clarifications from the bidders in order to complete our evaluation. We concentrated this effort on the 4 lowest bidders. The 2 highest ones were substantially higher than anybody else. And we did actually double check the 2 highest bids to make sure that they did conform. The kind of deficiencies that we found in the proposals included a number of things, just non-conformance with parts of the specification. We found where some bidders included some optional pricing, which was not in the spec, and it included that in their final bid price. In going through the details of the bids, we found where a couple bidders had inadvertently duplicated materials that we could clearly see was a duplication. So we required clarification from these 4. They were received. There's documentation in my letter about what they clarified for us. The result of all that led us to an adjusted bid amount for the bid that we believe is most responsive and best meets the specifications, and resulted in the lowest price bid from Electrical Power Products, which you'll see in my letter I refer to as EP2. That company, Electrical Power Products, they refer to themselves that way. That's kind of their brand, even though their corporate name is Electrical Power Products. That's what EP2 is. Their option 2 was with a building produced by Traxi, is the lowest responsive bid. Therefore, we recommend award the contract for the KM Green Control Building to Electrical Power Products for their option 2 Traxi building for an adjusted bid amount of $300,716. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Can you just, this is Bob Epson, can you just explain what's in the bid? It's the actual building and the installation on site. Did they do anything with the interior or equipment?
The building will be completely wired and constructed internally, including lights, light switches, outlets, paint on the walls. In addition, when we look at the substation equipment, there's going to be all of the protective relay panels, including the relays themselves, mounted and pre-wired inside the building. Another component that we have in this building is the battery bank and battery charger required to power the relays and the breakers outside. That's all part of this proposal. HVAC, there will be heating, air conditioning units in here, doorways. It's pretty much a modular building, which once it's set down, our substation contractor will connect cables from the outside, and it pretty much is ready to start.
So it sounds like that from that list, the protective relays might be the most critical functional element of the list. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, I would say so. That the reason we've got the battery bank in the building is to house and protect those relays. And we discussed in previous meetings, how important it is for these relays to detect problems on the power line and trip the breakers. And of course, another important part of this proposal from EP2 is the relay panels for PG&E, which we've gone through a rigorous review with PG&E on what they're getting, which our manufacturer is supplying.
Okay, so the protective relays are manufactured by EP2 or somebody that they're buying them from and installing them?
They buy them from someone else, and in fact, we have specified exactly what kind of relays we want and PG&E wants. So we have relays from GE, we have relays from Schweitzer. These are 2 leading relay manufacturers in the country, as well as a lot of other components
Yeah, based on the bids received and the engineer's recommendation, staff recommends approval of the EP2 bid at $300,716.
Okay, I'm looking at the wrong one. I'm looking at the EB2 that doesn't meet spec.
So it's the final adjusted bid amount of 300.
It's the letter.
Yeah. Well, I'm looking at the wrong column, not the wrong row. I got you, okay. I understand that. All right, so we are looking for a motion to move, to approve the bid for the KM Green substation project, control building, and to have that specifically awarded to EP2 option 2.
So moved. I'll second that motion.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, motion passes. And move forward to item D. 8D, discussion and possible action regarding request for change order for engineering services from Exponential Engineering. Michael.
Enclosed in your packet is a request for change order for engineering services from Exponential Engineering. This change order requests $134,000 for additional costs incurred in 2013 and $97,000 for anticipated additional costs in 2014. As you may recall, Exponential Engineering replaced Power Engineers in January 2013 as our electrical engineer and our engineer of record. The reason the board chose Exponential was for reduced costs, as Power Engineers estimated that their total fee would run $2.3 million, which is more than double that of Exponential. And its Power's deteriorating working relationship with PG&E. Exponential bid for design services in 2013 was $440,000 and was based on a 90% design. However, many aspects of the design had to be redone as they were not acceptable to PG&E or practical in the course of construction, including a change from a 6-inch conduit to an 8-inch conduit because of pulling restrictions. The board will remember that this 8-inch conduit actually got revised again by the contractor's request to 3 4-inch conduits. This resulted in a wider trench, etc. Reactive power issues, a redesign of all bridge crossings, continuous review and design adjustment by PG&E, including the structure and conductor loading for the overhead, ground clearances, pole arm configurations, etc. Obviously, Exponential has had many challenges and their scope of work has increased dramatically. Staff's main disappointment is not that the work was not with the work that was completed, but with the timeliness of the request of a change order. It is hard to make changes when a problem started in May of 2013, but you're not aware of that problem until January of 2014. To combat this, Exponential will be holding budget review sessions with the project team on a regular basis, every 2 weeks, to ensure that we are informed of any overages in advance and we're very fully aware of how our budgets are being handled. It also should be noted that RCI, our local firm, will be taking on more of the inspection services needed for the project to help contain costs. As noted, staff would like to defer action on this topic until the full board is in attendance at the February 8th meeting. And with that, both Tom Jadosi, who's the president of Exponential, and Dave Wrightley, who's our main contact, are here today to discuss this change order and answer any questions. So with that, I turn it over to Dave.
Thank you, Michael. Good morning again, and we realize this is a substantial change order request. So Tom Gadosi, our company president, and I are both on this call and ready to answer questions. Michael summarized pretty substantially what was in our letter. I want to again reiterate that we regret requesting this change order so far along in the process. We were frankly overwhelmed with keeping deadlines moving with both underground overhead designs and keeping project moving. And again, we're not able to report to Michael all the extent of all these scope changes. We started discussing this with Michael back in December. Just a few things about when we talk about our changes in scope. Michael's correct on the underground line. This reactive power, which we believe is a very, very critical item and is leading to this reactor at the Blue substation. And without controlling reactive power, it's possible that we could not even utilize the system. So I think this is a critical thing. The original design we saw used an unrealistic cable geometry that is really impossible to construct or very, very difficult to construct. And we've talked to other contractors who confirmed that. The 6-inch conduit, the original underground route was, we just talked about it, and you just learned about the Q&D issues with Volcano. That was something that caught up to us, and we were very involved in making changes to the system, to the underground system, because the location of Volcano and proximity to the design underground line was ignored basically in the original design. However, I would say the biggest impact, the biggest change for Exponential is definitely on the overhead line. Essentially, all of the drawings that we received from the district that came from power engineers for the overhead line were not utilized at all. Exponential essentially created a complete new design, a complete set of new drawings, that's a substantial effort that we made. And in doing that, we went through basically 6 different PG&E review cycles. And while we were going through these review cycles with PG&E, additional PG&E standards were brought into the requirements during the reviews. So we did expend a lot of time changing these drawings. I want to echo what Michael said, that we realized we did not manage our budget and did not communicate as well with the district last year, and we are going to actively participate, as Michael said, in working with the Out Valley team and looking at any possible changes that may occur this year and letting Michael know well ahead of time. We're going to be working diligently to try to control our costs and also those costs of PG&E by trying to minimize meetings with them, numbers of meetings, minimize number of reviews and submittals. We're working to minimize travel and, as Michael said, coordination with RCI so that RCI can handle as much of the construction observation as possible to result in a good project. I do want to point out that our budget for the KM Blue substation that we proposed in January of last year is still a good budget. We held those funds together, and that design is pretty much what we anticipated. And I would say the reason why is we knew we were going to do most of the design. Power had not done very much of it, and also there's not a lot of these different agency review requirements that have been getting us. There are a few things that were unexpected in the green substation as well, and that the costs that we're talking about for this year include additional costs for the design of the green. Basically, we had to create all new drawings for the green. We were given drawings from power engineers for the green, but we had to completely redo them. There was no revision for snow depths. We still received a lot of information from EG&E that forced us to update the drawings, and the ones that Power had provided didn't really address PG&E comments. And then additional work on telecommunications requirements that we didn't understand we were going to be involved in back in January. We were not even shown the drawing that had been submitted by Power, and we were involved in updating and getting those reviewed by PG&E. I think that summarizes pretty well what we're talking about in our letter, and Tom and I are certainly open to questions from the board.
Question I have is really of Michelle and the January 6th cost estimate forecast. Are these additional costs and your potential additional costs incorporated into the spreadsheet at this point?
No, they're not. I didn't feel appropriate adding those in prior to the board reviewing them and approving them. So they're not, none of the change order nor any of these costs are included in that spreadsheet.
And have the savings that we've realized versus estimate on the various substation components, it seems to me every bid that's come in has been low on those items. Have those been reflected in this overall cost?
Those have not. I wanted to wait until we were completely done bidding the substation before I made any adjustments to those numbers.
So if I'm just looking at the bottom line rather than the specific line, it appears that the two things are going to somewhat wash each other out, not quite probably, but somewhat.
Eric, the first question, I mean, the change order for the underground, I mean, that's related to volcano, those are in, right?
Those
So that's different, right?
Right.
Yeah, that's in there, but for the substation
Right.
work.
Right,
Like
thank you.
The 70,000 that we just saved through this
Is not.
control building is not shown.
Right.
We're
Well,
still,
and I think we had, I mean, if I'm adding in my head, it was like $120,000 or $150,000 less than cost estimate for all the other items that we bid out so far.
Correct.
So a couple $100,000 lower than estimate there, a couple $100,000 higher. I mean, I'm just trying to figure out where we are bottom line on this stuff.
Right, we have not, I have been reluctant to revise those costs because we still have OFM that still has to be bid.
one thing that we discussed at the operations capital meeting that I'll bring back before February is basically a recap of these LFM savings, and I think it would be appropriate to try to do a more in-depth look at our financial forecast given these change orders to make sure that we're in line not only with the savings that we've realized, but these change orders.
What would be helpful for me next month would be to have a comparison, because we did this at the time that we were switching from power engineers, and I think at the time, the potential for power engineers to sort of be the overall project manager, to RCI taking on more and bringing on exponential. I know we had a comparison of overall projected costs. So it would be helpful for me to see what we had been anticipating in terms of power engineers plus RCI versus what we went with, which is exponential and RCI, versus where we're forecast now to the end of the project. That'd be a very helpful comparison for me to see.
So first of all, Tom, I think it's the first time we're meeting you. Let me just say you have a great company, and we're really pleased with the quality of the work and the working relationship. So we thank you very much for that.
Thank you. We appreciate it, and we really we value our relationship with Kirkwood immensely.
All right, so let me switching topics. It just seems to me that given the amount of rework, and I believe you did all of it and did it well, it must have been pretty obvious that it was bigger than budget. I mean, without doing, I just have a hard time understanding how come it wasn't obvious that this was going to be over budget, regardless of that you didn't have the time to figure out how much. Do you have any comment on that?
Yes, as the project went on, we were constantly hoping that we would not have to go through another review process with PG&E, and that often caught us by surprise in terms of that. But you're correct. We started looking at these issues in September, and just in the middle of trying to get all the construction, bidding, and everything else going, we just did not manage to bring it to attention. That is our fault. And some of the requests that we made as reflects, we basically reduced the request by about $120,000. That we felt like it was, it's just not. Part of it is definitely our fault, and we need to own up to that. And so we have taken that into account as well.
Okay. And Dave, I had a question about the reactive power, which is also a major concern for all of us. What's the relationship between the reactive power and the size of the conduit? I mean, why would those be related to each other?
They were not, well, the geometry of the cable laying in the ground affects the reactive power.
I mean, the relationship between the three cables.
Correct,
Okay.
correct.
All right, I
And
can see that.
The original design that we saw was to somehow keep the cable in a triangular configuration, even in a direct buried installation.
Oh.
Very difficult thing to do during
Right.
construction,
Okay.
installation. And without that triangular configuration, the reactor power increases tremendously. So it was a kind of a false hope that that cable could be installed that way. And
Okay.
we took a more realistic view and thought we've got to be conservative and make sure we can offset any reactor power to protect our cable and allow us to operate the system.
Okay, so that makes a lot more sense. Now, the actual design is 3 conduits side by side, not a triangle, right?
That's correct, and in fact, that was even additional work we did when Q&D came back and
Right.
requested that, and they requested it at the same cost. We then, because we had built a computer model to assess the reactive power, we adjusted the model to show the 3 4-inch conduits, saw that the reactive power increased slightly,
Uh-huh.
but it was still acceptable.
Okay, so rather than trying to solve the problem by reducing it through the configuration of the cables, you went for additional equipment to compensate for it.
Correct.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Other board questions? Any public input? Okay, so Michael, your recommendation is that we're going to delay this until the next board meeting to entertain a possible adoption of the change order. That's what I understood, right?
Yeah, that's correct, and that has been communicated to Exponential, and they're
Yes.
acceptable to that.
Okay. I guess, Bob, Andy here, just some comments, gentlemen, before we close this for this board meeting. And if I were to look at the overall relationship between Exponential and KMPUD, what I think I'm hearing is a lot of comment that, we're satisfied with the work that's being done, but we're very unhappy with the amount of communication that surrounded this and alerts and information about potential cost impacts as the news broke, not many months after the fact. This contrasts completely in my mind with the Q&D discussion that we just completed, in which we said every step of the way with Q&D, if something got off track, they told us, we understood it, we decided together what to do about it. That's the healthy pattern that we have to see in this relationship going forward. In addition, I've got a pretty large question mark in my mind just because of the bids that seem to have been significantly off in working with Exponential, and I'm thinking particularly of the overhead bid, which was many millions of dollars above engineering estimate. Very unwelcome news. On the underground, luckily, we got one bidder who did come in near the engineering estimate, but the fact that all the other bidders were a multiple of about 2, as I recollect, above the engineering estimate, that concerned me. So I think, the question in my mind is whether or not Exponential as a company has a grip, not on the work they're doing, but on their ability to understand the costs that they're delivering to the customer. And that, of course, is a relevant point for going forward from here, as well as it is a valid discussion about what has already occurred. So predictability is absolutely essential for us going forward. We're under pressure because the overhead came in a lot higher. We're under pressure because we've got a crappy snow year going on. It's not a pretty picture. So I've gotten that off my chest. That's kind of the backdrop against which I will be considering what I think the board should do in respect to entertaining a potential change order. And with that, if no further comments.
Well, I guess what I would say, I think the biggest surprise in all of the estimates, everything else, is when an electrical company bids for civil engineering work, they overbid. I learned that, okay? But that didn't cause us any problems because the final bid was under the estimate. And secondly, if you don't know the conditions of the ground for placing poles, then you've got to, then it's very hard to know what the estimate is. I mean, those are the 2 big things besides rework from switching contractors. Those were the 2 big things we learned the next time we do. And sometimes underground is cheaper than overhead.
Yeah, I learned that we should have gone along the Forest Service roads rather than going overhead.
Yeah.
Great that we now know all the right answers.
So with all of that, I stand by the fact that we have a valuable relationship with Expo Engineering. I'm sorry this happened, but I appreciate all the work they've done.
Yeah, I heard that from several sides and completely agree.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay,
But I'm glad you got that off your chest.
it's good, catharsis is good.
Dave, would you agree with that learning experience?
Oh, definitely,
Yeah.
definitely. I guess I would just say one more thing in response to what I just heard, and that is that we are also very concerned about the construction costs that we've seen in both the overhead and underground bids. And one effort we're making is to try to bring in additional bidders that we would like to see if we could pre-qualify to try to make sure we have a strong competitive pool of bidders for the substation contract. It still remains to be seen what those bids are going to be. But even things like getting a pre-wired control building, which you approved today, is a way to minimize the amount of labor that is going to be done out in the field during construction of the substation. Again, this is our response to try to minimize these construction bids.
I mean, in relationship to that, as I recall, we were able to pre-qualify Q&D for that work, right?
Correct. We were able to pre-qualify Q&D, and then we also just, as of Friday, completed an additional pre-qualification round. So we've opened it up for additional contractors other than the ones we pre-qualified last year. I've not talked to Sandy to see what the results of that were, but we really wanted to see if we could get more contractors other than the ones that we've initially seen bids from.
One other question, there was a discussion a bit ago about how some inspection work was going to be transferred from Exponential to RCI. Is there an additional cost implied in that statement and from RCI side?
No, there's not. What we have in our budget is we have inspection for 2014. What Dave and I have talked about with Michael as well is that we want to make better use of the coordination between Exponential and Resource Concepts. I think we had a really great system that worked out this year, minimizing the amount of travel time that Exponential had. We're going to do even a better job this year. So at this point, I can sit before you and tell you that our budget as it stands is on track and good, and I don't see any additional costs that are coming out unless there's some huge unknown that, you know, causes this project to go beyond what we anticipated, which is the end of next year. So, and I'm not.
This year.
The end of this year, I'm sorry. Yes, I'm sorry. We're already in 2014. And I do not anticipate that. So I do not anticipate any additional costs.
Thank you. So the request that I made about those comparisons, I mean, obviously I'm including the inspection costs, you know, in each one of those scenarios.
All right, ready to wrap up on this, Michael?
Yeah, like to thank Tom Jadosi for joining us today, and you're welcome to go if you wish. David, if you could stay for the next agenda title, that would be great.
I was planning to, yes, Michael.
Thank you.
Well, thank you all very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you very
Thank you,
much.
Tom.
All right, we're ready to move on to
I'm
item
the
A.
OC Exponential Engineering Company.
Has left the conference.
Item AE, presentation and possible action on preliminary investigation into the operations, maintenance, and material inventory needed once the Out Valley Power Line is in operation. Michael?
We've been working on this project. It was a request from Director Rickert that we start discussing this. This is a preliminary report. We've had some good research into this, and Brandy's going to give the preliminary update.
Well, good morning. We have been spending some time speaking with Exponential Engineering on what we will need to do as far as the operation and maintenance once the Out Valley line goes into service. From these discussions, we have broken down our O&M plan into three main parts. The first of those parts is what we're going to do with the powerhouse to keep it operational in the case of an emergency, but reduce cost. So that's our first part. Secondly, there will be some operations and maintenance that we can do with our current staff, in-house maintenance on the Out Valley lines as well as on the substations. And third, there will be some operations and maintenance requirements that are above our expertise level. Some pieces of this require specialized training or a journeyman lineman. So I'll start with the powerhouse standby plan. This plan includes routine maintenance and checks of the generators, which we already do and will continue on the same engine hour run basis. We will also work up a plan to run all of the generators both online and offline on a regular basis. At this point, we're anticipating at least once a week running all of the generators offline for some period of time, and at least once a month running them online under load. We're working with Exponential on how exactly we will get load to each of those generators while hopefully not interrupting the power flow from PG&E.
So this would be artificial load, not a load bank of some sort?
No, we are,
True load, but just not an artificial load would be a load bank. This would be a true load like the lift circuit
or running of the generator but not exporting power. So we're still working through how we're going to do that. We'll also have to do some switchgear maintenance of both the medium voltage system where the out valley line's coming in and the low voltage switchgear which controls our generators currently. As far as in-house O&M, there's several things that our staff can do. It's been recommended that we walk the overhead line and underground line twice a year, checking all of the foundations for cabinets and poles, inspecting bushings and lines with field glasses from the ground on the overhead line. We will be able to monitor the tree growth in the corridors to come up with a good schedule of when we will need to trim the corridor. And then there are some things we'll also be able to do at the substation. In your packet, there are inspection log sheets that we have started to develop with the help of Exponential. And one of those is an inspection sheet for the substations. So there's several things we're going to be looking at once we get to the substation, which will happen once a month, summer and winter is the plan. So we'll be checking things like oil temperature, tank pressures. We're looking for leaks at the substation. We're making sure that the grounds and the safety enclosure, the fence and the road are all in good shape and haven't suffered damage by animals or people that are out in the area. So we'll be completing that inspection form, and we'll also be monitoring and draining, if needed, water out of the oil containment pit for the transformer. That could potentially fill with water if there's snow or rain, so we'll be taking a look at that. And then there are some things we will not at this point be able to do in-house. There are requirements for testing of the ISO meter every year that we will have to hire a contractor for. We will also need to hire a contractor for the operation of the 115 kV and the 34.5 kV breakers, which Dave Rightly has recommended be done either annually or biannually. We're still looking at a schedule on that. And we'll also have to do some discharge tests on batteries, some electric tests of our relays, and these will be on a periodic basis as well. So for the O&M that will be contracted, we've put out some feelers and we have received 2 letters of interest. Contra Coastal Electric and Hotline Construction have both expressed interest in providing this emergency and routine maintenance for us. They are both relatively local companies with the experience and equipment we might need for this project. But we also plan to put out an RPS as we consolidate what we know here, what we know that we're going to need and our emergency needs, to get a group of proposals for board approval.
So Randy, do you feel like you've got your arms around this pretty well? I mean, you're speaking very confidently, which I like.
I do feel that we've come a long way in knowing what is going to be required of us. And I feel confident that the things that we currently expect to do in-house, both at the powerhouse and the checks and inspections in the Out Valley project, we will be able to do.
Do you have a budget for how much fuel you're gonna burn?
That's something we're still working on. Not only how much fuel we're going to burn, but how we're going to make sure that we cycle through the fuel quickly enough not to let it stagnate in the tanks. We'll be working with our fuel deliverer on that.
I'll just express nervousness about the costs of trade-off.
The cost of,
Well, you can, test the stuff once a day, right? And we'd spend a lot of money
sure.
compared to the benefit. So, just
Right,
like to know how
there's-
much we plan on spending.
Right, and there's a true fine is line because,
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
if you
Every
don't
5
run
years would
something-
probably be 2.
yeah, if you don't run a piece of equipment, it won't run. So you need to run it on a regular basis to ensure that it's hooked up. I mean,
Yeah.
what generators like to do is run all the time.
Yeah.
So, some other comments, just to follow up on what Brandy was saying as far as the testing on load. Once the Out Valley line is in, we'll be able to test generators 3 through 8 with lift load. So during the day when they have a lift running in the summer, we'll actually be able to separate, have the residential and commercial coming off the PG&E feeder and the lift feeder come off of the powerhouse, and we would be able to, on a specific day, test 6 generators in that fashion with a load. So that's not the problem. The issue is generators 1 and 2, how do we get that load over to that side of the breaker? And Dave Wrightley will help us tackle that problem as we move further along. Also, Exponential will help develop a list of spare parts that we might need out on the Out Valley. Some of them stored in the recently approved control building. Some of them stored here at the district. Parts that you need to have on a shelf just in case you do have a problem. And we'll also be providing staff with training on during these inspections, what they should be looking for. Besides just kicking the tires, when they have the fuel glasses on an overhead line, what exactly they should be looking for, the rate of tree growth, when will we need to trim trees, that type of stuff. Staff will be taking a trip out to KM Green probably next week to actually get a lay of the land, take a look at the pits that we've already exposed, take the walk, which is about 3 miles out or 1.8 miles out to KM Green, and then come back and just get a feeling and make an inspection of the construction that is done to date with the lack of snow. And also, once the snow does become sufficient, we'll be doing that by snowmobile as well, just to get a lay of the land and make sure that we're trained before next winter when we'll be doing this on a monthly basis. And then finally, staff is working with PG&E to come up with a contact list so that in case of a maintenance or an emergency, we have the right people to contact to do a power down on specific areas of the line and to inform them if we want to power down on our 34.5 line. So this is going on in conjunction.
Later on in the package, there's a discussion of CalISO, and there was some reference to, I think, Trinity, PUD or Trinity, something or other.
Sure.
I'm just wondering if you have had or plan to have discussion or a visit to another similar entity such as ours that's running a small power system, possibly with not much experience, just like we don't have any experience right now, just to get any lessons learned or things to look out for, that kind of thing.
Yeah, we've been in contact with Liberty Energy. They're a pretty big firm. Plymouth Sierra, Bob Marshall up in Susanville. We've gotten to know them. There's nobody out there that has less experience than us, however. So but we're learning as we go and have made contact with similar organizations.
here's the things to look out for you might not be anticipating or something like that.
Right. And that concludes my,
All right, good. Thank you, Brandy. Thank you, Michael.
Brandon, the report from us here, is that going to be a paper system? Is that your plan?
At this point, we're anticipating a paper system,
Okay,
but
because we could probably do an iPad thing and plug
that,
it in.
we have discussed that just in the initial
Okay.
versions, but at this point, we're thinking paper. We could change our mind.
Believe me, take Bob up on it.
All right, this moves us forward to item 8F, presentation and possible action relating to the survey of the district by the Insurance Services Office, another ISO, resulting public protection classification and compliance financial implications. Michael and Rick, I assume.
yes, and Rick will be doing this
Yeah.
presentation.
Good morning. So this agenda report is found in the board's packet on pages 37 through 64. And I will be reporting on the Insurance Service Office, or the ISO Public Protection Classification Survey results for the fire department. To give the board a quick background, last July, a representative from ISO came to the district to inspect the fire department. This inspection information is used to evaluate the fire department in three main areas to assist the insurance companies on underwriting for property insurance. During the inspection, the ISO uses a credit system to evaluate the fire department in three different areas like I mentioned before. Emergency communication accounts for 10% of the total classification. The fire department operation accounts for 50% of the grade, and then the water supply system accounts for 40% of the score. Then the ISO mathematically reduces the score upon the relative difference between the fire department and the water supply scores, and they call this a divergence score. The weight of the score is on a 1 to 10 scale, and a classification of 1 being the best and 10 not meeting the minimum requirements. So, as you're aware, the fire department has held a Class 4 rating since 2005, and looking on the chart on page 46, which shows a countrywide, it shows the scores countrywide for a Class 4 score is quite good for a fire department. Again, on page 46, these scores actually take in professional paid departments as well, so a Class 4 for a volunteer fire department is extremely good. So our hope is to maintain that Class 4, but due to our hope during this inspection was to maintain the Class 4, but during the inspection, I was informed that ISO changed the way they reviewed fire departments. It used to be a very long, systematic process, and they'd actually go out and have you flush and flow hydrants to get the calculations on the fire flows. They'd have you pump the trucks. They wanted to inspect how many lengths of hose were on each truck to give you the maximum score. You had a certain amount of length of hose on the trucks. Well, they've reevaluated the whole system and the way they do it. And through that reevaluation, we came up short, and we were given a classification 5 rating during this last inspection. So ISO sent us a letter in November reflecting that, again, our class score would change to a Class 5, which is essentially going to translate to possibly more or higher property insurance. However, we've been told that if we do some mediation and reevaluate the way we were scored, that we could maintain the Class 4 rating. However, we need to do this within the next year until December. So, looking at page 47, which is a breakdown of score, I'll give you a quick update on that. So again, for emergency communications, we rated an 8.7 out of 10. For fire department operations, we rated it 20.23 out of 50. And for water supply, it was 34.20 out of 40. They gave us a community risk of reduction of 2.36 was our credit, and available credit was 5.50. So again, to keep the class 4, we needed a total of 60 credits, and so we'll be looking for an additional 3.52 credits. So after reviewing the report and these scores, it appears the best way for us to gain more credits is through the fire department operations and water supply system areas. So we will be concentrating on those areas, and I've already been in contact with an ISO representative to kind of dial in where the best bang for the buck is, so to speak. And so if we're able to provide ISO with some pump testing information as well as hose testing information, copies of the mutual aid agreements that we already have in place, along with getting credit for pre-fire planning or building inspections, credit for hazardous material training that some of the fire department members have now, which I don't think was accounted for during the inspection, along with creating an SOP, which we have an informal verbal SOP now, but if we give them a written document of the SOP for the fire department, that'll gain us some extra credits. And then they said that we weren't currently using the incident management system, the IMS system, and we do. So again, looking at those areas under the fire department operations, I think we can gain some extra points. As for the water supply side, I believe that the hydrant inspection and flow data that they have is probably incorrect, or they want to see the frequency that this was inspected. And when I was with the ISO inspector in July, she never asked for that information. So again, we'll be providing them that information to hopefully gain some extra credits. And then the one thing that we're not doing on a regular basis, which is fire testing or flow testing all the hydrants within the valley. We're on a basically 5 to 7 year cycle. If we reduce that cycle down to every other year, we'll gain some extra points as well. So in the next 12 months, we're going to be working aggressively to, again, gain some extra points, get reevaluated by ISO, and our goal is to maintain that ISO 4 rating. So that concludes my report, unless there's any questions from the board.
So the least intuitive part of this is the divergence, -9. So if we improve the water supply and didn't make any change to the fire department, we'd actually go further negative.
Well,
Is that correct?
you know, and I'm not exactly sure how they calculate that divergence. Again,
Well, they subtract the two numbers.
it's relative to the
Or
difference
they don't. It's
between the
something
fire
else.
department and the water supply sources.
Okay.
So,
Do you have any, all right, so it doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Is there an easy explanation then? No.
there,
The divergence?
for the divergence,
Yeah,
No, but we'll report back.
yeah, okay.
Well, I'd like to,
And I guess my other question is, if we have an early propane leak detection implemented, is that worth any points? That doesn't look like it's part of their evaluation.
I don't believe it is, but
Okay.
we'll certainly bring it up to them.
Sure, we're doing it anyway, so.
well, I'd just like to suggest that the board make clear that we not just set a goal, but that we actually achieve the 4 rating. I mean, it seems, from everything I've read about this, we went through it in the Capital and Operations Committee as well. It just seems like it should be doable, and from the things you've outlined. So I would just like to say, get it done.
Yeah.
And not just try to get it done, but get it done. Unless you come back to us and say, hey, it's going to just be so expensive to do X, Y, or Z, and the benefit's not worth it. But I think we should be able to get it done.
Well, I think in the short term, just checking up on that they have the right numbers in the reporting, because it sounded to me like they didn't have all the
Certain
data
things,
to show
right.
that. Yeah. That'd be the first place to go, I would think. And that might be a real easy fix.
So we have the retention of a 4 rating as one of the goals for the fire chief for the coming year.
Well, I don't think it's a goal anymore. I think
It's a directive. It's a directive.
it's a directive.
Yeah, it's in the base.
Okay. Anything else on this topic? Questions, input from community members? much.
Sure.
Appreciate it, Rick.
By the way, since we have people from the county here, is there any relationship with what we do on this stuff and what Alpine County does? I mean, is there a relationship there of any kind?
Well, as I mentioned before in the report, we do have a mutual aid agreement with Alpine County, Denver County, the Tahoe Regional Chiefs, which allows us, again, extra credits for establishing that. The incident command system, again, that's another area that we'll be focusing on. And for dispatching, we did extremely well for dispatching. Both ISO representatives said, I'm surprised you did so well with that. And one of the components they dinged us on was the lack of certification by dispatchers. And I know that Douglas County does our primary dispatching. Speaking with them, they have those certifications, but ISO may not have been aware of it. So again, it's just re-reviewing how they tested us and what information was gathered at the time. Hopefully will help us out quite a bit.
Okay, thank you. And we're ready to move on to item 8G, presentation of the final financial reconciliation, operational condition and warranty requirements of the wastewater treatment plant membrane replacement project. And I think, Michael, you're covering this, and Matt is not joining us.
That is correct.
Okay.
On page 65 in your packet is a memo from the district engineer, Matt Wheeler, summarizing the completion of the wastewater treatment plant membrane replacement project. The district replaced the existing Siemens membranes with the Coke membrane system. The existing Siemens membrane was sufficient to meet 66% of the ultimate build-out flow. You'll remember that when we did the wastewater treatment plant upgrade, we upgraded the entire plant, but we did not put in the 100% of the membranes. We have now put in 100% of the membranes the plant can handle, and we are up to a design flow of up to 120% of our ultimate build-out flow. So the project was completed on time with minimal plant shutdowns. The cost of the project overran plan by approximately $10,000, which represents a 2% overage. This was needed to replace the airflow meters for the membrane blowers. All reports are that we are happy with the installation. However, the test will really be is when we actually get a sufficient snowstorm, and then the runoff from that, the infiltration season, is when we really see the high flows. So during the busy December period, we were handling 100,000 gallons a day with not an issue, which is a good indication that these membranes are working really well. So I commend Matt Wheeler and district staff, especially Rick Ansel and his operations department, on a project well done.
So how did the 100,000 gallons compare to your figure of merit of 120% of max build-out flow requirement?
Yeah, so that would be like 50%.
50%.
Yeah, so we can go up to 191,000 gallons a day with current configuration. I believe those numbers are correct.
Yes, sir.
So, yeah, and they actually, you dial these membranes in so that it's like 30 or 60 or 90% efficiency, and for most of the time they've been at 30% efficiency. We had to dial them up to 60% during the December period, but right now we're back down to the 30 to 40,000 gallon a day mark. So Superintendent Dorberg was going to be here, but he's got a previous arrangement, but he needs to let the board know that he is happy with the installation and the performance to date.
Very nice project, nicely executed, start to finish, well planned, well executed. Pretty close to spot on cost-wise as well as getting the results. So, heck of a nice job, really nice. Kudos to the team.
Sir.
And I think going forward is just protecting those membranes and getting the longevity that we paid for.
Yeah.
Hopefully this time.
Yeah.
And we do have a new operations and maintenance manual, and I would share this with all of you if you ever need late night reading.
I'll want to be the first to borrow that one. Thank you. Okay, we wrapped up that one. And we are ready to go to 8 services, and regulatory affairs, coordination, and anticipation of connecting to the national power grid. That's a good long sentence there. All right, Michael.
As the board is aware, power purchase actually falls into 4 broad categories. The actual purchase of power, the schedule coordinator and settlement process, the regulatory affairs aspects, and the power purchase strategy or marketing, the long-term looks of our power purchase strategy. As evidence in your packet, the district has gone out to bid for a power purchase provider and scheduling coordinator. Bids have been received back to the district on Monday, and they are being evaluated by district staff. We're looking to make a formal presentation to the planning committee on Tuesday regarding these presentations. Both providers have been interviewed by the district, that's Shell Energy and TEA, and both seem capable of providing the needed services. NCPA, who we've talked about in the past, is undergoing a restructuring in relation to 2 new members. They are actually creating a process for acceptance of new members, which will have to go to their 16 respective governing boards for approval, and then the new membership has to also go back to those 16 membership entities, which may make it late summer or later before NCPA could accept new members. The RFP that we put out calls for a 3-year term, which is basically the minimal length in the industry. As far as the regulatory side, the district is using Braun Legal for regulatory affairs to date. Braun has been working with Brandy Fitchner, and we've had favorable results with regards to RPS procurement and the GHG auction. Staff has had conference calls with both Cal ISO and PG&E representatives to learn about our 3-way relationship. Remember that at the demarcation point of KM Green, we'll actually have a Cal ISO meter, and at that point, all 3 entities will be sharing this information of that usage. These conference calls have been related to meter data and management, transmission charges, load shedding requirements, resource adequacy, and then needed agreements such as the small utility distribution operating agreement and the meter service agreement, which I both placed in your packets for your initial review. A face-to-face meeting with ISO, Braun Legal, and Don Dame and district staff was held at the ISO offices in Folsom. What actually happened, we had a conference call with ISO initially, and I put the agenda in your packet as well. And they had a lot of questions for PG&E, and they frankly had a lot of questions that we couldn't answer. And I felt that it was important to have a face-to-face, get to know these people, and really have, try to build a relationship. And that strategy proved out, because it proved out that on the phone it sounded like there were a bunch of scientists that talked, in terms that we weren't able to comprehend, but in person there's just a bunch of people that were, just wanting to work with us. So it was a really productive meeting. Braun Legal was there, Don Dame was there, and we had a productive meeting, and it, set a pathway of moving forward with this relationship. Items on from the meeting is that Dave Riley will be in contact with their meter engineering team to make sure that how we get that real-time data to ISO, whether it be on a leased line circuit or exactly how is that information shared between the 3 entities. The district will need to review 2 more agencies that they feel that we need to be a part of. That's the Northern America Electric Reliability Corporation and the Western Electric Coordinating Council. So we'll look at both of those and see if we need to be members of those as well. And see what requirements that they have as a distribution. We'll need to negotiate the small utility distribution company operator agreement with ISO, and Braun Legal will help us in that affair, and also the meter service agreement with ISO. We need to designate a service scheduling coordinator, which planning will be taking up on Tuesday between TEA and Shell or another entity if neither of those are found acceptable. And we'll need to develop a local reliability plan for resource adequacy. Plan will need to be approved by the board of directors, and further vetted with ISO. And then, of course, we shared our ISO, our contact information. Other areas that we're looking at is the ability to use the powerhouse as our resource adequacy. That's a very important subject. At first, on the phone call that we had, ISO was, just basically said that since we could not transmit through the line, that we could not use the powerhouse's resource adequacy. But while we were down there, they said, oh, well, since you're an island and so separated, and that since you can shed us at any time, if there is an issue in the summer and they need to shed load, then maybe you could be called as having sufficient resource adequacy. I think that kind of concludes my report. I think we're heading in the right direction, and I look to Planning Committee to give more details on this.
So I was really confused about that resource adequacy stuff when I read it. I mean, maybe I just don't understand what it's intended. I mean, I thought it was intended to say that entities such as we need to have sufficient resources so that should there be more demand in the transmission system, the distribution system can handle, that we can provide our own power, or we have adequate resources, which our powerhouse clearly does. I mean, what would be the possible reason? Why would we have to transmit down to PG&E to qualify?
Resource adequacy is iron in the ground. This is that the district has made commitments to have sufficient power, generation, so that we could provide our own generation. That we've made that resource available if they needed to share.
Us, is right. Just for taking care of ourselves, right?
Right.
Not taking care of somebody else.
Right, and this all came about when there was more demand than actual capacity during the 2000.
Yeah, no, so what's confusing is if we have a powerhouse that's adequate today as an island, why wouldn't it be adequate, in the future? I mean, I don't get the rationale for anybody ever even questioning that we don't have the resource adequacy. And yet it seems to be, it is still a question.
They're not used to dealing with utilities in our configuration. Right, and so every utility in California has to demonstrate that either by contract or by iron in the ground, they can supply power to their customers under a variety of expected cases. Right? And that's what it means. So we're better than any utility in California, right?
Right.
In that regards. So I offered additional help in this regard if we need it, so because we should be able to take care of this and not have to pay a fee.
Yeah, if we have to pay for additional 15% of our load, through Shell or TEA or somebody else, that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So I'm
Okay.
we have the big guns behind us, so we feel very confident.
Oh, okay, and that consists of Michael Sharp and.
And Mrs.
Yeah.
Whitaker.
Yeah. And the other resource we can bring in is a lot of these Shell people used to work at SMUD, and so the people that hired those people are all resources we know. So if we need additional resources on this, we can find them and not have to pay for it.
The other question I have is, what would be the purpose of the memberships in the other two agencies?
But that's what we're looking at. During the face-to-face meeting, they said, oh, well, you're certainly a member of any ERC, right?
Ever heard of it?
No, but yeah, we'll be looking at it. We were required to join the Northern California Joint Pole Association, which Randy is managing. We're still questioning exactly why we're a member of that, but we are.
Because we have a joint pole contract.
Exactly what they do for that is what we're questioning, but.
Well, nothing. What's the confusion?
How much does it cost to go on to this?
Michael, the other part of this process is some of the western dams contracts come up in 2015 and as a public utility.
WAPA?
Yeah, we can bid on that, so I assume this is part of the
Yeah.
process, because that's like 2-cent power.
So that is the Western Area Power Authority, which is based in, we're in the Colorado, actually, is our regional office.
Mhm.
And as recently as Monday, we called Sandy Pebbles, who's our contact on that.
Okay.
I think that power is actually available in 2017.
Is that what it is? Okay.
So we've structured these RFPs to end at that period so that we don't overcommit, because that could be up to 25% of our power, as you were saying, at 2-cent power.
Right.
And people like, you were asking about other resources and tying into sister utilities. How we came to know that was through Barb Marshall, through Plymouth Sierra, who said, you guys are applying for WAPA, right? And
Sure.
of course, we said, what?
Okay.
Further questions, comments? Public input? Okay. And that concludes item 8H. Let's see, moving on to 8I, discussion and possible approval of ordinance 13-04, adopting developer agreement, connection permit, and related procedures and requirements for new development and construction projects. So, Michael, this is you, and this is the set of procedures that we updated for working with potential new developments. As I recall, we saw the documents, and this is some overarching logic that ties it all together.
Yes, exactly. So this has been on the agendas for the last 4 months now. Ordinance 1304 has been drafted to memorialize current draft district policies concerning the provision, extension, and continuation of utility service and related facilities for new development and construction projects. As you'll recall, we've already approved our development agreement, connection permit, and plan check permit in previous agenda items. And they've been approved by the board of directors as to form and content. In fact, we just acted upon one during the consent. We approved the Renwick developer agreement. And the draft ordinance was presented to the board for review at the November 9th meeting. Pursuant to board direction, the ordinance and related forms were distributed to the stakeholders in the valley and the independent contractors in the valley for comment. We have received comment back. We have instituted a fee schedule for the developer agreement as requested. The draft ordinance was then placed on the agenda for the December 13th meeting, but was deferred on. Attached for your review is this ordinance along with the schedule of fees, and it is staff's recommendation that the board approve and enact ordinance 1304.
Okay, any board questions or discussion?
No, I really appreciate it. I think the fact that or the way you distributed it to those parties that would be interested in this, and I'm confident that they had a review and had a chance to comment and so on.
Okay, any public input? Okay, looking for a proposal to adopt ordinance 13-04, adopting a developer agreement, connection permit, and related procedures and requirements for new development and construction projects.
I'd like to move that we adopt ordinance number 13-04.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Yes, wasn't it 14-04?
Oh, good point.
Probably should be.
Yeah, it's actually.
I know I should have said that before I voted, but.
Well, it might be 14-01.
That's exactly what it would be, is 1401.
Okay.
Okay, so should we go back over this? as a
Okay,
Yeah.
can you reopen this?
Well, we already approved 13-04.
It's something else, huh? I'm looking for a motion to adopt ordinance 14-01.
That would be correct.
Yeah, well, I'll rescind the previous motion and move that we adopt ordinance 14-01, which is the developer agreement.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Good catch, Bob. All right. We move to item 8J, presentation and possible approval of computer services contract with Wired Solutions and transfer to alternate hosted email service.
In front of you, please find an agreement with Wired Solutions regarding providing IT services for the district. The district is in need of an IT firm with multiple representatives who can quickly respond to the district's ever-changing needs. Wired Solutions seems to fit this bill. The district staff has met with representatives from Wired Solutions several times, and they have already begun providing assistance on a time and material basis. Staff has found their staff to be knowledgeable and responsive. The cost of this service is $3,000 per month and allows for up to 25 hours a month for off-site services. This is by far the least expensive multi-staff service that we have found in the area. If after time the district is not utilizing the service up to the 25-hour mark, we would then ask Wired Solutions to lower their price and the number of hours allowed. This is basically a retainer with large projects being come back before the board for subsequent approvals, much the way that we do with other engineers. Besides the revisions shown on the attached from Dick Shanahan, the district needs to negotiate an acceptable term for at the request of either party. Additionally, in your packet, you'll find a breakdown of research staff has completed into hosted email service. The district is looking at alternatives to the Volcano service we now use. Staff is leaning towards the option number 3, which is the Office 365 Small Business Premium. This includes updated office products, office software, which I feel is very important as the information shows the breadth of different software that we're using throughout the district. Staff is looking for board approval to enter into a contract with Wired Solution based on a modified agreement acceptable to district council, and to move to the Office 365 Small Business Premium.
The 365 is that a cloud-based solution?
It's a Microsoft Exchange
Right,
cloud-based
but it's
solution.
cloud-based, right?
It's not with the server at the district.
So what you provided here are the edits that council's looking for.
So we recommend approval of that contract with the edits that have been shown.
Okay. Board questions or discussion?
So is this in lieu of having our own IT staff? I mean, essentially, or is this, who's been providing these services to us in the past?
Yeah, we've had quite a few different ones. We had Brendan Reynolds for a while. We had Ryan for a while. Drew has been on in-house, but we've always had someone that we could rely on. The problem with these single source IT services is that they're single source. And we need a company with multiple representatives so that if they go on vacation, get sick, or whatever, that we can have 4 or 5 different people that we can rely on. We have so many different hosted services right now where our VPN lines are so important to us for so many different things, including PCS, AMI billing, that we need to have a very integrated IT solution that we can call and get instantaneous response. This has gone before finance, so maybe Director Epstein would like to comment.
No, I think it's pretty much essential that we upgrade what we currently have, which it's not adequate to really provide reliable service.
And good value for the money, $3,000 a month is a.
Well, that's if we use 25 hours a month. There might be periods when that's necessary, but we'll find out. If that's,
So we pay less.
that might be over capacity.
So we pay less if we use less, is how it's structured.
We'd have to negotiate that. It starts off at 3,000, 25, but we would negotiate that down.
Yeah, you described that.
Right.
Okay. Do we need a motion to move forward on this, or?
I think a motion would be appropriate.
All right, looking for a motion to approve the computer services contract with Wired Solutions and transfer to the alternate host of the email service. Both parts of that? Okay.
Let's move, we adopt that.
And I'll second that motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. That concludes section 8. Anybody need a 2-minute comfort break here before we go on to the next major segment of the program? Okay. Sneak out if you need to. We move to item 9, the manager reports and the general.
That wasn't a
manager report.
rhetorical statement.
report, Mr. Michael Sharp.
On page 88 in your package, please find a list of potential capital projects for the upcoming construction season. This includes the Loop Road project, which completes the replacement of the direct buried electrical line around Loop Road, and probably more importantly, completes the propane loop around the entire valley. The Dangberg line, which relocates an existing electric line, which happens to run through a drainage culvert to a more suitable location. Interior tank inspection, this came out of the DHS inspection. We'll be draining each water tank this summer and then having our district engineer inspect them as far as the coating and the durability of the tanks. And then finally, the wastewater treatment plant SCADA project, which will integrate the new system with the old system at the plant. This list will be incorporated into the 5-year capital plan for inclusion in the 2014 and 15 budget, which we will begin preparing. Along with this effort, staff will be dividing the capital plan into replacement projects and capacity projects, or both, in order to formulate a possible connection fee adjustment. This will be brought back before the Finance Committee and then to the board when appropriate. That said, due to the lack of snow, district staff is working with Treasurer Epstein to come up with an expense reduction plan. This plan will be formulated in stages and implemented if snow does not reach us by certain target dates. We have already laid off seasonal snow removal help, suspended all purchasing except for critical items, delayed all capital projects except for the water meter upgrade, which is funded through the COP and the Out Valley project, of course. We've cut back on the use of outside services and consultants. As noted, Matt Wheeler isn't here today, and at Thursday's operations and capital meeting, there were no consultants in attendance. We've suspended all training activities. We've delayed the completion of the capacity report for the planning committee. As time progresses and snow still doesn't arrive, the cuts will get deeper and more painful. We've made a lot of progress with preventative maintenance at the district rather than fix it when it breaks mentality. So there's a fine line between cutting back on the reliability for the service that are provided. And I was wondering, maybe Bob had any comments on that?
No, I just encouraged us to look at that. I mean, December, although we don't have the final numbers yet, it's going to be down on revenue. So we have a couple issues. One is how to maintain services, but the other issue is covenants that we have on our loans. The hardest one being the electric covenants, and at some point you cover that with property taxes. So I want to look forward and say, if we've already seen the peak of the snow this year, what does that look like, and how do we maintain our covenants, and how do we conserve cash? And on the other hand, if we have a blistery February, then it's another story. So I feel we're taking prudent action now, and then I really recommend that at the February board meeting, if the snow conditions haven't improved, then that we consider what these forecasts are going to look like and how do we manage it.
This is good. This is good to be thinking this through, well in advance and taking action quickly. It's an unfortunate situation, but a good response to it for
Yeah.
sure. So.
I should mention, our biggest expense is debt service, and there's nothing we can do to change that amount. The second largest one are energy costs, either our internal consumption or fuel, and we know where that stands. But the savings we could do are material compared to what our additional losses might be there. So that's why I'm encouraging that.
So you said we don't yet know what revenue we got in December. That's true?
Well, at the last finance committee, there weren't final numbers for December. We know it's.
We know revenues, the expenses aren't. We don't know our net at this
I'm sorry. We don't know the margins for is what I meant to say. Thanks.
Yeah, I've heard from several homeowners, including my wife, about how the utility bill's the highest she'd ever seen. So it seemed like the combination of very cold temperatures without much snow on at least residential properties was pushing it towards more money coming in. But
yeah, unfortunately, not as many people are in their houses.
Yeah.
But if they were, we'd be.
Yeah, the lifts.
Things would be booming.
Restricted lift running.
And then on the lifts, I mean, there is snowmaking, but it's not the same capacity as having the, the backside run and the wall.
Michael, on the capital projects list, I know clearly the meter replacement is funded by the COP. Is the loop road also funded by the COP?
Is it in there, or it could be a,
Russ actually is covering.
Oh, right, that's right.
oh, it's a
Oh,
Russ.
that's Russ.
Russ.
So
Yeah, that's
we
right,
have
because it's
money
electrical part.
in place to do certain things. I mean, like the meter money is sitting there.
Right.
And then there are other things that the money isn't sitting there necessarily, and those are the ones we would hold off on.
And that concludes the manager's report.
All right, sir. On to the operations report. Rick.
The main item I wanted to report on for operations is the district's response letter to the California Department of Public Health, which is in the board's packet. Just to refresh the board, on October 11th of last year, the California Department of Public Health came out and inspected the district's water system operations and record keeping, along with operator certifications. In November, we received the official inspection report and were directed to provide a written response to the report by December 31st. And again, enclosed on the board's packet on pages 91 through 105 is the response. And you'll note that, you'll see in the response as well as sort of the appendix or the action items that they wanted us to deal with or work on are like, for example, number 1 are there, and then our responses are in bold. So overall, the results of the inspection were as expected, with only a few minor maintenance deficiencies noted. An example of these are replacing some of the sample taps in our well houses. They have threads on them, and the inspector didn't want to see threads on there. Potentially somebody could attach a hose to it. So we're going to switch those faucets out. And then replacing the screens on the tanks. They're not quite large enough for what the inspector wanted to see. And then other deficiencies that could not be immediately addressed the other deficiencies that could not be immediately addressed are the order to maintain the current operator certification as distribution 2, which in the past we've had a distribution 1 operator on staff, which was satisfactory. However, now they're asking us to maintain a minimum level of a D2 certification. So our water superintendent, Derek Dornbrook, is going to be taking the D2 test in March, and hopefully that he'll pass the test and satisfy that requirement. And then the other large item on the inspection report, as Manager Sharp mentioned earlier, was to have our tanks inspected. So we'll be working with District Engineer Matt Wheeler to complete that task. But essentially, our goal is to get these activities done by June, and provide a written response to the CDPH that we completed all the tasks. We're kind of weather dependent right now. I know there's minimal snow near the tanks, but it's better to go up when we can actually drive up to the tanks and make those repairs and inspection ourselves. So unless there's any other questions from the board, that concludes my operations report. I can expand on snow removal and some of the other departments if you like, but I think a lot of it's been covered already today.
The draining of the tanks, I mean, it's literally, it's water is being used, and you just don't refill the tanks until.
Correct.
Right. So
We wouldn't waste water to
Wouldn't waste
do
the
the
water.
inspection.
All right, thanks very much. Appreciate it. On to the electric and propane report from Brandy.
In your package, you'll find an update report. The first item on this report deals with the switchgear at the powerhouse. In December, we experienced a communication problem on the low voltage switchgear side between the controller for generator number 6 and our main touchscreen. PowerSecure was able to provide remote assistance. We were able to reset that and establish communication. and resolve that problem. As a result of our conversations with Power Secure, it was brought up that they had some recommended maintenance, periodic long-term maintenance, about every 5 years or so, that they would like us to perform or have performed on the low voltage switchgear and on the medium voltage switchgear, which is where the out valley will tie in. They're working on a list of required maintenance items, and we'll be working with both Power Secure and Exponential to make sure that these items are addressed during the out valley connection and going forward. Other items at the powerhouse, we have started in on our air compressor maintenance. As you know, each of our stacks has ammonia injection, which is controlled by these air compressors. We are on the 8,000 hour service for each of these, and we had a technician come out and do training for our staff. Staff is working to complete the remaining 3 inspections and maintenance items over the next week or so. We did find additional parts that were needed as we got into the maintenance. In the field, we have completed the second propane patrol, which is a CPUC requirement. It's walking of the entire propane line, looking for any visible problems in the system with people having overhanging ice on propane meters, any noticeable smells or obvious problems in the system. That was completed in December, and no abnormal conditions were noted. And lastly, and probably most interestingly, our power quality meter update. We have received from Exponential Engineering the programmed power quality meters, and we plan to install these, one on each of the circuits at the lower shop for residential, at the meadows for the commercial, and at Chair 7 for the lifts. We were able to get one of these meters installed and establish communication with it. I was able to download a harmonic report from this, but we did run into a little trouble. We have a device that is used to activate the meters to actually read kilowatt hour usage from the meter, and we needed to do a software upgrade on that device. I am happy to report that upgrade was done yesterday and completed. So as soon as our electrical staff gets back from their weekend, we will be installing these meters, activating them, and making sure that we have all of the capabilities that we need from these meters. Once that's done, we have the procedure down to establish communication, download reports, which we'll be collecting and sending off to Exponential once we have enough data. And if there are any questions, I'd be happy to take those.
Chair 7, is that representative of how the rest of the chairlifts would behave if we put a meter on them? I mean, there's got to be different size and type and whatnot.
That location was chosen. Dave Rightly felt that the circuit was small enough that any location would work, but he felt most comfortable as far from the powerhouse as we could get on each circuit.
It's not measuring Chair 7, it's measuring the circuit.
The whole circuit.
That's just the point at which it's installed.
Yeah. So it includes other chairlifts?
The whole circuit.
Okay.
Yeah.
All the chairlifts?
All the channels.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Throw out a question. Any other questions for Brandy?
Only problem, Chair 7 is it's not running.
So it is representative of the other chairs?
It just happened.
Chair 5 May.
Okay, thanks so much. Forging ahead to the administrative report. Jill.
Hi.
Hi.
Financials start at page 107 of the packet with the balance sheet. These are the financials that you received for the rate study workshop. A couple of notes on our cash on the balance sheet. as of November 30th, our operating cash is $2,043,000. This is up $186,000 from plan. The main reason for this is in our budget, we planned to pay 100% of our RUS interest expense out of operating, and that's not the way it's actually happening right now. Any of the capital projects, the Out Valley project that's not complete, we're capitalizing that interest, and that's being paid out of the RUS fund. So that's the main reason for that. On the trustee special construction account, which is our RUS fund, that's up about $10 million from plan. That's due to the timing of when we pull money. And those are my notes on any cash. Is there any questions on the balance sheet before I go to income? November was actually a pretty good.
I'm sorry,
Oh.
I did have one question. I thought maybe the reason we were up a bit on the cash is because our accounts payable seem to be quite high. In other words, we haven't paid our bills yet.
That's mostly RUS.
Oh.
That's Out Valley expenses, so it's coming out of
Yeah.
the different account, yeah. November was a pretty good month for the district. Our combined net income for November was $45,000, which is up about $17,000 from plan. Our operating revenues were down $25,000 from plan, but our operating expenses were also down about $41,000 if our property tax allocation isn't taken into account. Our year-to-date net revenues are up $20,000, and our year-to-date expenses are also up $30,000 from plan. So our net loss year-to-date is about $572,000, which is almost $25,000 up from plan. So we're still behind on year-to-date. I'm going to make a note on our water fund. Revenues for November were up about $9,500 from plan. November was the first month that we implemented the water usage charge, so that's the reason for that. Our year-to-date water, the net loss is $195,000, which is about $63,000 better than plan. Wastewater revenues, oh, that was wastewater that I was talking about, oops. Sorry, on water. That was wastewater that I mentioned, sorry about that. Our water revenues were up $6,800 from plan. That's due to the usage charge. The wastewater was also up because we increased wastewater 3.5%. Back to water, our net loss was $45,000, and that's $15,000 up from plan. For electric, November revenues are down $45,000 from plan. Our November net income is $69,000, which is $44,000 up from plan. Our year-to-date net loss in electric is $72,000, just about $276,000 up from plan. That's due to us allocating property tax revenue to electric to meet the tier ratio. For propane, November was the first month that our operating revenues were up from plan. They were up $6,800 from plan, so our net income for November was $30,000, just $6,000 better than plan, with our year-to-date net loss being $90,000, which was $27,000 worse than plan.
Can you explain, on the propane side, I mean, last year we were generally in the positive territory with propane, weren't we? And it seems to me that our expenses are variable because the cost, people aren't using propane, then we So can you sort of simply explain why we're experiencing this loss in propane?
Part of it is weather. There were some expenses in propane this year. We did the leak test.
Yeah, I remember
and we did,
stuff.
so salary and wages are up. Some of the expenses are up from that.
Maybe I just need to go back and compare this year with last year, because it seemed to me propane was generally the bright light in all these.
Not in summer.
Yeah, not so
Well, maybe it
much.
was just in the later after
Yeah.
the winter months, I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's part of the problem, because they have the fixed costs and they don't get covered
Right.
in the, in the warmer seasons.
That's exactly it. And
Yeah,
then,
and November is effectively positive, so it's a little bit more reflective.
and then our expenses, we didn't have any propane leak analysis in last year, and this year it probably cost us, Brandy, on the total basis, $30,000 to $40,000 for the propane leak inspections and repairs and materials. So I think that's what you're seeing, is that I'm glad we did it. I mean, to remind us, we repaired 78 leaks in the system, so I think we have a much tighter system that will eventually pay for itself in less reduction.
On page 122 is the operating cash waterfall. It shows as of December, our operating cash is $1,882,000, which is up $385,000 from plan. This is also due to the Russ interest expense. We made a payment in December. We pay that every 3 months, so there will be a jump every 3 months, and that's why it's up from the November variance.
And I assume that the projected cash waterfall is more reflective of normal snow and so on, as opposed to what may.
Right, and we're working on a amended, or if what continues, what we can expect revenues to be, so this will change.
Yeah, Brandy's working on exactly what Bob mentioned earlier, and that is a what-if scenario on what revenues could look like in January, February, March if the conditions continue.
On a different note, I wanted to mention that we did send an RFP out for an audit for this fiscal year. As the board's aware, we've been using AKT the last 2 years. Both years, the actual cost for the audit came in at higher than what the contract was for. So that's our main concern with it. So we did send out an RFP to 6 new firms as well as AKT to see what we can get back. All the firms that we sent them out to do have Russ clients. And the last thing, when we were stuffing our December bills, we did find that we made an error sending out some of our November statements. There were 106 statements that weren't mailed to customers for November. So we have found that. We've sent a letter to those customers affected, and we made sure to go through. If there were any penalty charges assessed on any of those accounts, we've reversed those. And we've met with staff to make sure that that does not happen again.
Are we getting closer to the point where those who don't want the paper bills, don't want to receive the paper bills, can avoid receiving those paper bills?
As long as that's all associated with the new website now.
Oh, so I could go in and
You can select.
check that option?
It was harder to do with PCS. In PCS, if you only selected email bills, it wouldn't create a file for us to transfer over to the new website, so we had to switch everyone to both. But now if a customer registers for only email, that's all they will get.
Okay, so we just go to our account and go to settings or whatever, preferences, whatever.
That's all I got.
Okay.
I'll stay for committee.
Okay. All right, let's move to the committee report. reports. First up is communications. Bob?
Okay, so as Eric just mentioned, the major activity here was the major, re-implementation of customer bill presentment, as well as the online meter data. So that had a reasonable number of hiccups, but everything got done. And so the next step is really a couple of things. One is to get more customers to sign up, because we're ready now to scale. And then the additional things we're going to do is to implement the replacement for one call now, so the alert system will get implemented next. And then also we'll start implementing more active monitoring of the meters themselves and detect unusual meter activity and do staff and customer notification. So all of that should be, most of it will be tested by the time of the next board meeting. Probably most of it will be rolled out in February. So that's going quite well.
Yeah, I just want to thank you, Bob, and the staff. I mean, it's, I don't know if other board members have done it, but going in and checking the meter, what the meters are reading is really, it's kind of interesting, and it's very useful.
Yeah, and it's kind of fun. I mean, right now it's 10:01, so the latest report arrived. It's been processed, and 2 minutes later it'll be posted.
Yeah.
And no hints. So everything's working. It's working pretty smoothly now, and the staff has been great and training everybody. So we're ready to move on, and also the net metering customers now get a bill that reflects all the information. So all that's good. The other things I wanted to mention, we did have a discussion of the Mello-Roos notification, and it was the recognition of the committee that we actually sent a letter to every property tax payer to let them know that this happened and what it doesn't have any impact on them, but we thought we should proactively communicate. So we're getting that mailing list, and we'll be drafting that in the near future. We're also looking, at how to improve the video activities and things of that sort. So we're moving in on that, but most of the energy is really on enhancing the website and the customer activities around that. So that's the communications report.
Next up is planning, which is my committee, and we haven't had a planning committee meeting since the last board meeting, but we've got one coming up next Tuesday. Certainly getting the remaining actions wrapped up on the Mello-Roos restructuring will be a major focus there, and we're also talking about the power purchase topic and all the ins and outs and new acronyms in that space, and re-energizing the discussion about employee housing, which has been up for discussion in TriTac in a recent meeting. We'll be back on the TriTac agenda, as I understand it, on February the 7th, at which point I think we'll be looking for some opinionated members of the community to join us and let the TriTac folks know what they think has been going on and what should be going on in the future with regard to employee housing. And we're advocating basically a change of approach that will really drive tangible increase in employee housing units as opposed to the way that it has been operating, which is a little bit more of a kind of like an offset, and an energy offset version of employee housing. So that'll be an interesting topic because there's a variety of opinions about what the right way is to approach that. And we've, as a PUD, got a pretty strong opinion because I think we've led the pack in terms of actually creating high-quality employee housing in the valley, and want to keep moving forward along that path. I think those are the main points of the planning committee. And finance, Bob, is that something you?
That's me also. So first off, financially the district's in very solid shape. We have excellent cash reserves. We can weather even worse than this. So that's all really good. I think the major things that we have coming up that haven't been discussed, one is the follow-up from the rate meeting that we had, and that's to come up with looking at how we actually model rates and compare those to actuals to see did we correctly model them, do we need to make adjustments, how will they be affected by adverse weather. So we're working on that. We're working on trying to model revenue contingency plans so we can do the best job of managing that. And then those are the major items. There was also discussion on penalties and interest policies and customers, and our feeling is that that should be left to the discretion of the general manager to make adjustments as need be, and if enough adjustments get accumulated and it needs a change, then we'd ask Michael to propose what it would be. But otherwise, we're comfortable that the current procedures work fine the way they are. And that's really everything else. I think we've covered already.
Bob, has the Finance Committee or will the Finance Committee come to some determination of the laddering of the bond draws in the short term?
Yes.
That kind of stuff?
Yeah. We'll do that. A lot of it now will probably move more toward short term. But at the moment, there aren't going to be any draws. We have a little while before the next draw. So that's more likely to be a spring issue, and we'll bring it back to the board in advance of that.
All right, let's see, we show operations and capital separate here, they've combined.
They've been
right?
consolidated.
Yeah.
And basically, Randy and Rick and Michael have covered just about all the topics. I think the only thing you didn't mention, Rick, is that he has some potential new volunteers.
Yeah, we had an open house actually 2 open houses since the last board meeting, and gained a couple of new Kirkwood employees that are interested in volunteering, and so very supportive of that. And if anybody else is interested in helping us out, we need the help. So.
Did I leave anything out, Eric?
No, that's good. We have covered most of them.
All right, thank you, gentlemen. And the Personnel Committee?
We meet on January 24th, and we'll be going over the first 2 quarters worth of goals, see where we stand and what happens the next couple of quarters. I think that we want to be sure that we're coordinating with the Finance Committee on, through Standish, I'm sure we will, understanding CalPERS issues and what we want to do about that, if anything. I think those will probably be the major topics of discussion.
Okay. And on to item 11, general discussion, the opportunity for board members to ask questions for clarification, provide information to staff, committee updates, request staff to report back on a matter, or to direct staff to place a matter on a subsequent agenda. Any thoughts from the board?
Cheryl's here to have a discussion of meet the candidates.
Yes. Heck, aren't they all here now?
Not everyone.
With 2014 being an election year, I thought it might make sense to invite all the candidates that are running for office in both Alpine and Amador County, 2 of which are here from Alpine County today, to come up and have a meet and greet. I talked to Bruce, and he is allowing me to use the Red Cliffs Club for this. It'll be open, and each candidate will be given a table where they can display their materials, and I hope to be able to get in touch with more than 100 registered voters here in Kirkwood to let them know of this opportunity. So it'll be scheduled on the afternoon of February the 8th in the Red Cliffs Club from 2 to 5. I've organized this in the past, and it's just very informal, and it gives everybody just an opportunity to meet the people that are running. So, any questions?
So, Cheryl, how will you notify the registered voters?
Well, I'm hoping that someone might have a list of.
I have the emails of all registered voters.
Yeah, I talked to Barbara Howard yesterday, and she can't release the current list to me. But I think it's fair.
I have the one from
I perused the list, and I think it's very similar to the list that I saw when board members were running, so that would be.
yeah, I have the 2012 list with emails. So just let me know, and we'll send that out.
Okay, thank
Cheryl has conveniently placed this meeting on the next board date so that you can fill up your entire day with meetings.
Thank you. I appreciate the initiative. That's, yeah, really, really nice of you to